tonight. Can you hear me back there? I would like you to stand for prayer, and then after that, stay standing for the pledge. Father, we just bless you tonight. Father, we thank you for the people that have turned out tonight. Father, I ask that their minds are open to receive what's going on, Father, and that we are able to move our community forward by the decisions, by the talks, by the information given out tonight. We just bless you, Lord. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You may be seated. Can you turn it up? I can't hear you back. And I'm already Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? I can hear me now. Okay, We the People was formed to enlighten the people of our parish and neighboring parishes about the CO2 projects that are going on in local and surrounding parishes, as well as how those projects may affect you, your health, your family, your land, and your life. Our mission stands for protecting your constitutional rights. The committee members are the people in attendance in the green shirts. Well, I ask all committee members to stand up. Anybody got a green shirt on? Y'all stand up so everybody can see you. All right. Thank you. As a sign of solidarity, we have united with Louisiana Alliance and Save My Louisiana as our base. A statement was made at another public meeting that left a lasting impression regarding our advocacy against CO2. If you are invited to dinner and you don't have a seat at the table, that means you're on the menu. If you are interested in joining this movement, please scan the QR code or register manually by filling out the form at the table and check the box for membership. Membership is free. Not much of that going around. This information will only be used to keep you informed of any future information and meetings. If you would like to work on a committee, please indicate that on the form as well. This evening, we will have a panel of guest speakers here to share their knowledge of CCS, eminent domain, water table risk, medical health impact, property value, mineral rights, and the metadata centers. We ask that everyone be respectful of each speaker as they share their information. There will be an open floor question and answer time for the audience after all the speakers are done. We'll start with panelist number one.
Good evening, Joe Petrie. We're going to start off with a video that's going to show basically the results of a CO2 leak in Satarsha, Mississippi, and also in Lake Nino, if I pronounced it right, in Cameroon. Now, the one in Cameroon, just to be clear, was a natural occurrence, but it could be the same result when you have the compressed CO2 coming up to the surface. Okay, so even though it was a natural thing, it could still happen with this. All right, we'll get started.
In 2020, a pipeline carrying carbon dioxide ruptured in Mississippi. The plume of toxic waste forced hundreds to evacuate and sent 50 people to the hospital with dizziness, seizures, some even foaming at the mouth. First responders said it was like a zombie movie.
And number one. Oh, red, she's laying on the ground, and she's shaking, she's kind of throwing out of the mouth. I don't know if she's having a seizure or not. Tell me exactly what had happened. Like, I was driving, and I ran into, like, a lot of fumes, like, there's a lot of noise going on. Because I didn't know if anything was going to explode. I don't know what's going on.
Me and my brother and my first cousin, we decided to, just take a day and go fishing, and we went up there and we fished, had a nice time, and we were on our way back. And around about 7 o'clock, I saw a big explosion. I was there when it happened. It actually just, big cloud of smoke went up in the, went up in the air, told her, I said, Mama, this pipeline that blew up down here. We on our way to come get y'all. And by the time we turned on Prairie Creek Road off number 3, the car just shut off and went dead. We woke up at the hospital.
So you passed out at that point?
Yes.
Okay. Now, we have also with us, we have Thelma Brown, and Thelma is Deanna's mother?
Yes.
Okay, and Thelma, tell us what about that phone call and what you were doing when it came and what happened.
I sure will. When they didn't come, you know, I just got in the room and I thought about it. I said, let me get me a towel and we'll close up in one room. And people were calling me, telling me I had to get out, you got to get out. Some were saying stay, some were saying go. You know, it was just like chaos all around.
But you couldn't go, right?
I couldn't go.
Why?
I had a flat on my car.
Okay.
I had a flat.
You were trapped.
I was trapped.
Okay.
At that moment.
And these were grandchildren.
These were grandbabies.
And the youngest was how
He
old?
was about 4 months at that time.
Okay, and the other
Yes.
two were a little bit older.
Yes.
And one of them had asthma,
Yes.
and that started getting a lot worse.
Both of them have asthma, and the little girl, she even had more now, just this explosion.
Went to bed, basically with the kids and,
Yes.
and gave it up.
I gave it up.
Yeah.
Whatever will be, will
Right.
be.
You couldn't get out.
No.
It has been 5 days since a major gas leak in Yazoo County sent a whole town fleeing their homes.
Well, throughout the week, most have been treated and virtually everyone is back in their homes, but the burden has not gone away.
12 News' Alex Love joins us in studio and explains how these folks are feeling.
One of the closest to Highway 3, the Douglas family home was hit hard by the carbon dioxide leak, but feels they were one of the last to get out.
My wife had brought the dogs out to use the bathroom before we go to bed. The dogs come back in, but she didn't come back in. She was laid up against the porch. She couldn't breathe. I got her in the house. I called the sheriff's department and they told me we had a gas leak.
Though they didn't require treatment in the hospital, since moving back in Sunday, Larry and his wife have found themselves coughing frequently and ill.
Been sick in her stomach, can't eat, don't have no appetite, having headaches. We were sitting at the table eating supper the other night. I looked over at her, she had blood running down her nose.
While the company Denbury has shut off the pipe and begun the repair process, the Douglases and others have trouble settling back in, fearing an accident like this could happen again.
One of Africa's most bizarre natural disasters occurred on the 21st of August 1986 in a remote mountainous region of northwest Cameroon. It's estimated that between 1,700 to 2,000 people lost their lives. When outsiders entered the area after the disaster, they found whole villages full of corpses and pastures full of dead cattle. People had seemingly died where they stood or slept. The bodies of men, women and children lay sprawled in the roads or dead in their beds. The bodies showed no signs of physical trauma, and to compound the mystery, this tragedy occurred in a remote rural area. The answer lay in one of the strangest natural disasters to have happened in modern times. At 9:30 p.m. on August the 21st, 1986, a loud rumbling noise was heard coming from the lake. A huge bubble of water and carbon dioxide gas rose up from the bottom of the lake, sending a column of spray 100 metres into the air and sending a 25-metre high wave across the surface of the lake. At the same time, an estimated 1.2 million cubic metres of gas was released into the atmosphere. This gas cloud, being composed of carbon dioxide, which is heavier than air, began to sink down, forming a layer 50 metres thick, which then flowed over the crater lip, down into the valley towards the surrounding villages. The effects were instantaneous and devastating. As the cloud flowed out from the lake at an estimated speed of 40 kilometres per hour, it suffocated every living thing in its path. People, cattle, wildlife, even insects were smothered. Nothing could escape the deadly cloud. There was nowhere to run, there was nowhere to hide. There was nothing anyone in the path of the cloud could do. The gas cloud passed through the villages of Nios, Char, Kam and Sabum, killing an estimated 1,700 to 2,000 men, women and children. Around 3,500 cattle were also killed. At a distance of 25 kilometres from the lake, the cloud began to dissipate and some people were able to flee, although many suffering with symptoms of gas poisoning. Around 800 survivors were treated at the main hospital in Yaoundé. It was believed that many of the victims had been poisoned by a mixture of gases that included hydrogen and sulphur, although later doctors concluded that death had occurred from carbon dioxide asphyxiation.
In 2020, a pipeline carrying carbon dioxide
Well, it's a heck of a way to start it, but well, you don't know how much we appreciate everybody here. If this wouldn't be if it wouldn't be such a man-made catastrophe that's fixing to happen, we've got plenty of other things we can be doing. And you don't know how much I appreciate y'all coming and listening to the truth. We're not getting paid. We're not paid lobbyists that ExxonMobil goes out and hires people to go out and I want you to go over there to the Capitol. I want you to read this. That's what Exxon and all of them, that's what they're doing. They're hiring people to read whatever they want. And I'm gonna try not to repeat myself, but working in the oil field for Amoco, we run into these casings in the field, building roads to these locations. And Sonny Lannon he's from Big Lake, he was a superintendent out there. Y'all go plug that well. So we go plug it. No concrete, no nothing. Dig 6 feet down, cut the casing off, put a weld on it. Paul Bertrand here in Kinder was welding one over there that Sun All had. Flames come out in the hole, we pulled them out. Company man's, how much weld you got on there? He said 1 inch. You're not getting back in that hole, backfill it. I've talked to different engineers, teachers, professors. They claim there's 450,000 to 500,000 open holes that does not have a name to them. There was no DEQ back then. There was no conservation department. They were drilling wells in 1910, 1920s, 30s. There's no names on them. You just did it, left. And I've heard stories about plugging wells with pine knots. You cut them, fit them, drive it in the ground, in the pipe, because it didn't rot. And I'm not the only one that, if you talk to enough people, you know, there was Walter Cole plugging wells back then. There was Danny Smith could probably tell you the same stories, you know, the guys around here. Paul Bertrand would be a good one. I'm not making things up. I'm not an engineer. They got engineers here gonna tell you the real good stuff about it. This Chico Aquifer, that second to the last one over there, that comes across through here. And it was one of the best finds, you know, in the late 70s, early 80s. When you start putting 250 million cubic feet of gas under as many wells as they want to put around here, you're not going to ever be able to go back and produce any of that out of that Tuscaloosa marine shell, okay? Now, with that being said, there's fracks that went on. When the Amoco was over here drilling, they started fracking, and when they would frack, they'd have a 400 barrel a day well, and they wanted to get 2,000 barrels a day. They'd frack it on Ab Marcantel, Colonel White, Matilda Gray, Randall LaFleur, right over there by, they dug some wells, they drilled some wells over there where Luther Savon's place, north of Scott Savon. by the Bartell brothers, all over. They were fracking them. Now, I don't know if you can see this long, skinny one, but that's the frack lines. Everybody got an ExxonMobil flyer right there in your mailbox a couple of months ago. With those frack lines around it, you got earthquakes, you got frack lines, you got fault lines. You don't know where this is gonna go. You don't know, when they start pumping this in the ground, it's gonna go 10 miles this way, 6 miles this way, 5 miles this way, and where's the salt water? Up. And I'm not making this up. Ray Crochet was the driller for Amoco. He lived right down there in Evangeline. RJ tired Ray Crochet. I called Ray, asked him why we were getting 100% salt water when they fracked those wells that were producing 400 barrels of oil a day. And here's what he told me. McNeese State University come down here, best pipeline in the world. Denbury leaves Baton Rouge, goes to Houston. Best pipeline. I'm not a pipeline guy. John is 37 leaks, 47 leaks, however many they are. Well, we got them. We got a record of them. We met with the governor. He says the pipeline is 30 years old. Is it 10 or is it 11? 10 maybe? It's 30 years old, best pipeline. We got a leak east of Kinder, about 1.5 miles. They're fixing to work on it this week. 600 foot of line, they're gonna put a liner in it, a CO2 line. It's at 20% capacity. You get a little water in CO2, it'll eat up everything. These engineers are gonna tell you how it's gonna work. There's no cathodic control on these pipelines. There's leaks, there's 3 leaks around the Kinder area. That one over there, east of Kinder, 1.5 miles. Then it comes below the Column subdivision out here, east of Kinder. It's about 0.5 mile south of the Column subdivision. They're fixing to put another one in. It's gonna be about 1/4 mile east of the Column subdivision to go up here. So they can inject CO2 up here. Well, they're gonna inject CO2 where they did all this fracking. The very first meeting we had 11 months ago, we're gonna do a 4D seismic. That way we'll know if it's safe enough to put it here. Well, people, you don't go out there, they're drilling a well, and you don't go out there and drill a test well, that class 5 test well, and spend, I don't know, $400,000 on the location of the road. You go out there with a board road, and if it's not suitable to put CO2, you pick your boards up and you go somewhere else. They've already got the road built, they've got the location built, rocked, everything. They're drilling the well, never shot seismic. 11 months ago, we're gonna do a 4D seismic, and that never was done. So how do they know where it's gonna go? There's your class 6 well. You can tell somebody's lying to you if you just go look at everything. And there's nothing but lies have been going on here with ExxonMobil. Passing around money, that money's gonna talk. You know, what's gonna happen to this aquifer? You're gonna find out what's gonna happen to our aquifer. You got crawfish, how many crawfish farmers from Beaumont to Mississippi? There's more than these LNG plants, I promise you. And people are making money with crawfish. You either raising them or selling them or cooking them somewhere, you're making money. Finally, you can't make money with rice and soybeans. I'm sorry. How you gonna water your chickens? How you gonna water your cattle? How you gonna flood your crawfish ponds? How you gonna flood your rice fields? I need to kind of quit now. I guess my time's getting up. But this is the truth. We're not Exxon. We're not getting paid to come out and say this when they don't know what they're saying. And I want to thank y'all again for coming and helping us stop this. Senators and representatives, they're the same way. Their Exxon's got them in their pocket. Thank y'all for coming.
Can it be stopped?
Yeah, if you stop it, and you call your senator representative, it can be stopped. But there'll be questions and,
We've got a
at the.
plan. We've got a plan.
It can be stopped. Yeah, they stopped it in South Dakota. It's leaking in North Dakota and South Dakota. These guys are gonna tell y'all some more. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for showing up. I'm gonna have to take this microphone. I can't stand in one spot like that. I'll go crazy. But I'm Michael Nichols, have 40 years experience in natural resources conservation, surface water quality and groundwater quality. Worked as a project manager for the federal government, and we've constructed some of the largest coastal restoration projects in the state of Louisiana. Just finished one down by Lake Pontchartrain, as a matter of fact. But I believe in this, y'all, we the people. We just want to deal with the facts. I'm not here to give you my opinion. If I do, I'll let you know when it's my opinion. But everything I say is based on research and white papers and what's actually happened somewheres, not what we think might happen. It's already happened. That's the reason I'm here right there. They call me Sabi. That's short for chemo-sabi. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on CO2. These presentations, we've been going at this for about 2 years, y'all. This one right here is kind of important because let's just say we do remove all the CO2 from industry. What about from transportation? When I was driving down here, I'm not saying it's bad or good, but I was watching 18-wheelers belch that CO2 out like it's nobody's business. Are we going to get that out of the air by capturing CO2 from industry? Absolutely not. You believe in climate change, right? You hear that all the time, climate change, climate change. I heard global warming when I was a graduate student at LSU. You know, I'm gonna lie to y'all and say that was 10 years ago. It's a little bit longer than 10 years ago. But that's all the hurricanes we've had, folks, and we're gonna have more. You know, that's the Great Flood of China. Killed millions of people in 1930s. There's the Hurricane of Galveston, 1910, I think it was. 8,000 people. The good, bad, and the ugly about CO2. If we didn't have CO2, we wouldn't have those grandma's yeast rows on Sunday. So I'm not totally against CO2, but it is very dangerous when it's in a condensed state. We have about 100 people die in the workplace every year. And you're going to hear more about this in some other presentations, but the main thing is they want to capture this from the emissions at the plants, okay? And they have these magic fans, I call them. They're called direct air capture machines. And they're going to suck carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. This came from California, folks, this idea, if that tells you anything. It's been in operation over there about 2 years, and they've yet to report to us if it's working. So when you start looking into this, when you get down in the weeds, folks, what are you thinking? Come on now. What are we thinking here? Let's slow down. There's no reason to hurry up and do this. It's with our tax dollars. There's something screwy going on around here. Did anybody watch those cartoons back in the day? President Trump says this about your carbon footprint. He said it's dreamed up by evil people with evil intentions headed down a path of destruction. And as a scientist, here's where my opinion comes in. I have to agree with that statement. Why is it so bad? Why is CO2 so bad? We're breathing out right now about 4% because it's in a highly condensed state. It's what's called a supercritical fluid. It has to be at about 2,200 psi. Do you know CO2, it goes from dry ice to gas. It's not going to be in a liquid state in this environment right now. It doesn't happen. You got a bunch of pore space down there according to these experts, do you? And how much can you put? Brad's going to tell y'all more about that. What do we know happened? They closed a school down in East Texas. I called over there and talked to the fire department. It was CO2, folks, not carbon monoxide. It was carbon dioxide. They closed a school down in Midwest Wyoming for a whole year. They had to bus those kids 40 miles. Had benzene levels 200 times the safe limit, and CO2 was 5 times the recommended safe limit. Okay, benzene is a carcinogen. Those kids were exposed to that. You're gonna get here from some folks say, well, nobody's got cancer yet. Well, that's actually a true statement, not yet. But look, this is from enhanced oil recovery. This ain't even from this CCS. This is something they've been doing. When you hear them say 40 years, that's what they've been doing for 40 years right there. It's not safe. That's the leak down in Sulphur. My daughter-in-law passes with my grandchildren. I showed y'all 3 of them. She passes through there twice a day, folks. Look how low it's hanging to the ground. It's going to suffocate you. It's going to suffocate you. That's explosion at the plants in Lake Charles. My son works at the plants. First thing we do is grab our phones. You okay? You text. You okay? You okay? Look where the plume's going. The plume's going up. CO2 is going to go to the ground. You heard Charles talk about the pipeline industry. It's only been a couple of leaks. Not true. It's been numerous leaks. Pipelines will leak. Gas pipelines will leak. CO2 is very, very corrosive. You get this witch's brew of all this stuff mixed in with the CO2 when you're captured from the smokestacks, and it increases the corrosiveness of it. So not only are you dealing with CO2, you could be dealing with hydrogen sulfide, sulfur dioxide, nitrous oxide. There's all kind of stuff in there, folks. I think John may talk more about that too, about how much of this, these contaminants besides CO2, because CO2 in itself, like we're breathing right now, is not a contaminant. You start mixing stuff with it though, and you do have problems. In the industry, CO2 sweet corrosion. They talk about what they've been doing for 40 years. Well, they've been dealing with sweet corrosion for 40 years. They've been dealing with sour corrosion for 40 years. They spend millions and millions of dollars trying to keep that corrosion down. That's how corrosive this stuff is. Hydrogen sulfide, you get a good whiff of that, you ain't got to worry about the CO2. The hydrogen sulfide is going to kill you. This is what happens to the inside of the pipe with CO2. It starts pitting. And then you end up in these test sites here, and they tested it, what's called a running ductile fracture. It's like a zipper opening up. It can go for hundreds of feet. Just quickly about enhanced oil recovery, you pump it CO2 in the ground, it pushes the oil out. Brad's going to talk more about that. My point here is you got a relief point. You're not pumping all this stuff in the ground and capping it off. So it flows back to the surface. It has an exit point. Not with CCS, it's capped off. So it's going somewhere. Where's it going to go? We have some CO2 pipelines that we use CO2 now for enhanced oil recovery across the United States. We have about 5 sites. The one this pipeline here comes from is Jackson Dome in Mississippi. They're supposed to use the CO2 and flood the oil field, and then at a certain point, they're supposed to reuse the CO2 once you get the oil field flooded. We have a lot of pipeline incidents where people get hurt and killed. That Texas by far is the most because they have the most pipelines. Louisiana is about 4th in that, so we're not far behind for such a little state. We have a lot of pipeline accidents and incidents. We got a lot of gas pipelines. There's no debating that. I'm not nearly as alarmed about natural gas pipelines, our safety record, as I am about CO2 because it's not highly corrosive like the CO2 is. Natural gas is not. Okay, if you take what we have right now, they say, we've been doing this for a long time, Mike. I think you heard Charles, about 10 years. Some places we've been doing it in other parts of the nation, but it's only 0.25% of the total pipelines in the U.S. Very, very small fraction, not even 1%. There's the proposed build out of CO2 pipelines. It's about 90,000 miles, 545,000 acres of land. That's not including the temporary workspaces. It's a lot of pipelines, folks. Here's what happens over 20 years. You got 1,000 people get hospitalized and 243 ain't with us anymore. I bet those families would tell you that this stuff is dangerous if you ask their families. What is a dangerous level of CO2? I get this question a lot. I'm breathing out about 4% right now. My wife would say I don't breathe too much. It's time to be quiet, Michael, but I'm going to have to keep going. I want to get some important information to y'all. Out in the atmosphere, it's only about 420 parts per million, folks. It's a little bit of CO2. So what happens when you have a leak, you can have, 100,000 parts per million, and you're going to die. Anything below that, you're going to get sick. You can only be exposed to it for a certain amount of time. What does the experts say? Everybody we want to debate. We don't have the facts, we don't have the science. Yes, we do. Scientists from across the world says that we need to look at this when we're dealing with our groundwater, that we might have groundwater contamination. So we have to, you can't trust it is what I'm saying. You cannot trust this new technique. It's too new. They hold up a can of Coke, CCS folks. Pour a can of Coke on a battery and see what happens. You know, there's only a little bit of CO2 in a can of Coke. As a matter of fact, over 125 trillion cans of Coke it would take to get the CO2 to fill one CCS site around here. And if you look at that, that would wrap around the earth several 100,000 times. That's how much CO2 we're talking about injecting into the ground. That gives you an idea, excuse me, how much is in a metric ton of CO2. That's just out here in the air, not compressed. Well, what about when you compress it? Well, take a 2,400 square foot home, the average size home. The amount they're going to put in one site, in I call them disposal sites, but you can call them injection sites. It would take 700,000 homes, folks. It'd reach halfway to the center of the earth. And you're going to get a lot of debate about that. My point is, it's a lot of compressed CO2. You heard Charles talk about our Chico Aquifer, near and dear to my heart. You know, we're taking a big risk here, contaminating the aquifer, southwest Louisiana. I mean, if we that's what's called a sole source aquifer, and if we lose our aquifer, we're out of business, folks. You know, we rely heavily in this part of the world. We gotta have our aquifer. Too much risk as far as I'm concerned. What'll happen if the CO2 hits the water, form carbonic acid, and it'll drop the pH? So what would happen if we start drinking acid water? We'd have health problems. What about earthquakes? Say it can't get in the water. Yeah, eminent domain. Those are fighting words, all right? If you believe, anybody in this room, that eminent domain for a private company is fair and just, then you're un-American, because it's not what this country was founded on. This country was founded on landowner rights. Okay, if you take that away, you're leaning toward communism, and that's been studied throughout history. I'm not talking about federal eminent domain. I'm talking about eminent domain for a private company to do this CCS. Not building a road, not building a school. We're talking about for a private company, folks. All right, the first site that they had, they tried this, it leaked. Illinois has passed legislation, their senators voted 55 to nothing to ban it from their aquifer. Okay, what can we compare this to? Because we haven't done it for 40 years. We can compare it to natural gas storage. Liso Canyon in California, all right, they had to evacuate thousands of people. It's been linked to serious health risk, maybe low birth weights. We've had numerous disasters of these natural gas storage sites all across the U.S., folks. You go over here, look about it. Moss Bluff, Texas. They say the good thing about Moss Bluff, Texas was it caught on fire and burned up, is why it wasn't so bad. How's that for not being so bad? In Kansas, 26 businesses, 2 fatalities. It blew a mobile home up. These people were sitting in their home, it blew them up and killed them. Okay, that's natural gas, folks. It leaked for miles. It went 7 or 8 miles. Okay, I mean, this is the closest we can compare this to is these natural gas storage sites. They're very dangerous in themselves. We've had, episode after episode. Okay, what about the economics? Everybody says, oh, this is good for the economy. If you look at the reports from Oxford, it says it's a dead-end road from an economical standpoint. If you look at what we studied here in the U.S., they say that carbon capture will generate more environmental damage than they prevent these projects, and I believe that. I've studied this and looked at this intensely. Okay, Montana, South Dakota, Illinois, Louisiana, these are places fighting this. Okay, Montana had a site set up for 125,000 acres. You know what I'm saying? They reduced it down to 2,500 acres and 1 test well. If you look at what happened in South Dakota, they banned eminent domain for CO2 pipelines. Okay, what they said, the attorney up there, is they did all this to themselves, these companies, by not treating the landowners fairly. They had 80 pending lawsuits. This is just to show you how much we export in natural gas. Why are you bringing this up, Mike? Because this is all about giving Europe low carbon natural gas, folks, when you start checking into it and learning about it. It's not low carbon, it's low cost. Because we're paying for that with taxpayers, with the 45Q. That's our money that we're using for this. We export more natural gas down in Cameron than we harvest from the Haynesville Shale. We need that gas here in Louisiana, folks. I want us to have cheap fuel costs and cheap electricity, not Europeans. That's globalist thinking. Okay, I'm gonna go over this real quick, and then I'm gonna say something about data centers real quick if I have time. What about these plumes? We're gonna talk about that more. You got a geologist coming up here and is gonna explain to you about these plumes. But I've been saying the whole time this started for 2 years, we done went down the rabbit hole, folks. We way down the rabbit hole now. Okay, where's these plumes gonna go? The sites that I'm familiar with, where they've done this across the world, is in unpopulated areas. The closest that direct air capture machine in Iceland is 31 miles from a populated area. Okay, if you look at the Sleipner project or Sleipner project, you hear a lot of boasting about that. It's 160 miles from anybody. It's located out in the Norwegian North Sea, and that plume is moving as of 2020, the last data I saw, that plume is moving 3 times faster than they predicted it. The engineers predicted it to move, so that's kind of scary. And where would a plume go? Well, you have to ask an 8-legged horse, because I think they know more where it's going to go than these people just telling us where it's going to go. Data centers. Do I have any time left, Aquila?
Yes.
Okay, how much I got?
5 minutes.
Okay, 5 minutes. All right, I'm going to quit talking so fast. Whew. I want to make sure we interact with the audience and ask questions. I know that's why y'all are here. But data centers, okay? We're new to data centers. You know, I'm sitting back scratching my head going, okay, it's you know, data centers. Here's what I think about data centers. I don't think that our children are going to be employed by them. I'm not trying to be ugly, because I've did janitorial work before. You know, I've done it. That was one of my first jobs. That's what our children's going to be doing. Just like they're taking our money and our wealth out of this state, they're going to bring people in here to take those jobs. We're not going to get those jobs, folks. Now, we're going to get some construction jobs, which my whole family's blue collar. I'm all for that. But you know what? Instead of wasting the money on all this stuff, let's build our roads and bridges. Okay, let's take that tax money and do something constructive with it for our communities in Southwest Louisiana, and not allow our wealth to leave the state like we've done for so many years. The data center up in Northwest Louisiana, the people, I've talked to them, I've called them on the phone just out of curiosity and talked to the people up there. I asked them, how's it going? They said, well, it's going good, as long as you don't try to take a shower from 6 o'clock to 10 o'clock, because you're not going to have any water pressure. So those kind of demands tell you right there, you know, that's just from the people coming in to work, folks. That's not even the data center up and running yet. So it's going to be extremely high demand on water. The utility bills have already increased 30%. Just like with this CCS, our utility bills are steadily climbing because we're shipping natural gas to Europe. And listen at this, folks. Our leaders, if that's what you want to call them, our leaders are saying we're going to double that. We're going to double our exports, so Europeans can have low carbon fuel. And I told Governor Landry not too long ago, face to face, I said, Governor, if we feel that strongly about this, you pull that ship up in Cameron. You pull it right up beside that LNG ship, and you pump it full of CO2, and you send them in tandem to Europe. And then we're all good, Governor. You know, we'll call a truce, you know, because I really feel that way, because I know what's going to happen when it gets to Europe. They're going to unscrew that cap and let that CO2 go right into the air and laugh at us over in the States. But anyways, I'll be around to answer questions, and thank y'all so much. I appreciate y'all being here tonight.
Good evening. Yeah, put it into the display mode, please. Okay, lights. Okay, thank you for having me. I am a geologist / geophysicist. I've been doing oil and gas exploration for the last 45 years. I'll give my credentials, 13 of those years, recently I've been listed as a senior geoscientist with a private employer. Previously, 25 years as a manager of geology, geophysics for both private and publicly traded companies. I'll skip to the part where I've been testifying to the Legislative Assessment Committee on what my concerns were about putting CO2 into the ground. We really were not looking at CO2 as a problem. It didn't really affect us. It didn't touch us, so we didn't really care about it. When we got a letter from Denbury Exxon, that particular letter stated they wanted to take over a producing oil well in the Austin Chalk in the Masters Creek field, Vernon Parish, and convert that well into a CO2 injection well. We were told by the landmen, which are a friend of mine's, that if we just signed on the dotted line, we would make millions. Naturally, I asked, well, give me the formula for how we're going to make so much money. I understand the formula for making money from oil and gas, but not from CO2. When you produce a barrel of oil, you sell that, and the people who have rights to share in that particular barrel of oil, generally are in a unit. They have a particular portion of their acreage in the unit, and they proportionally share in the amount of revenue that brings to you. But with CO2, you're sticking CO2 in the ground. You're not selling a product. So how exactly are you making money? I've yet to have an adequate answer. The only justifiable answer that I can see is big giant corporations like Exxon and Occidental can sell their credits, their tax credits, for about 90 cents on the dollar. So they can trade that. They've got to do that within the year that they sell it, and you take that cash and use it to do some other project. Initially, we were concerned naturally with the stranded minerals because they were leaving behind a well that was producing oil. And we didn't want to participate because we didn't believe in sticking CO2 in the ground to begin with. They told us, finally, that if we didn't participate, they could just take the land via eminent domain. That got our attention. We really didn't want to give land to people because what we do is make deals for our property for oil and gas participation, transporting through a pipeline. And they have always come to us throughout the decades. Our company is 140 years old, and we've always made deals with the pipeline companies. This struck a blow to the whole, free market enterprise system. So it really angered us. We were willing to go to bat against it. First thing I did was to call Brett Guyman and Phil Tarver, and we spoke with them in Baton Rouge. They invited us to come back to a roundtable discussion, and that was last year, early last year. I have been back to the Legislative Committee several times and discussed this issue, testifying before 20 different legislative folks, but there was really quite a bit of concern really just about the safety issues of it. We were looking at it from the stranded minerals, leaving our minerals behind, and how are we going to be fairly treated? If they just take a well, plug it, put CO2 in it, how are they going to actually measure how much money they owe us for all the lost revenue from the well that's still producing? Well, that became a matter of concern too. But when I began to study the issue more, and I had been studying the CO2 issue since Al Gore was claiming it was an existential threat to the planet. And the scientists that I began studying convinced me that no, CO2 really was not that much of a threat. But the grand authority of the commissioner to go ahead and assess what our mineral value was something totally new to us. Typically, that is done by us in the oil and gas business, where a unit is created and we sell that oil and gas to a third party who may want to take it over from us once we find it. Never has it been where the commissioner actually makes a pronounced assessment as to what it's worth, and they give you some maybe paltry value for it. But once I really began studying it, the safety issues jumped to the forefront. Contamination of aquifers, ponds, natural springs, the drilling hazards. The drilling hazards jumped to the forefront of my mind because we were concerned that if you did put CO2 in the ground and the CO2 went in places that Denbury was going to put it. They wanted to inject CO2 between 4,500 feet and 13,500 feet. That's a huge vertical section. It requires every driller from then on to have to squeeze and isolate that CO2 plume where they're putting it. That's a very costly thing because 1 in 5 cement squeeze jobs works. If you know anything about the oil and gas business, when you drill a well, you've got to set casing at say 2,500 to 3,500 feet, if say you're going to 10,000 feet. And we're really concerned just about the bottom of the casing. When you drill say to 6,000 or 7,000 feet, you might put casing again, and once again you squeeze cement at the bottom of the casing. You get quite a bit of cement that might go up 200 feet. That's an overlap. But what cement has is the ability to degrade, and it also creates, if there's gas in that cement, it'll leave behind some very vulgular spaces. So when we run cement bond logs to prove just how much cement we have at the more concentrated points where we're concerned about, we can see that the cement is just leaving a lot of gaps all the way up back. But we're really just concerned about building enough cement integrity right at the bottom of the casing. Well, when Denbury gave us their proposed letter, we were kind of shocked. We were really shocked by that because once you start injecting CO2 into the ground, traditional cement is not nearly so, it doesn't hold up nearly as well in the presence of CO2. Schlumberger created a cement that's called Evercrete. That cement was a little bit better. But in that testing, they proved that traditional cement was just not going to hold up against CO2 for very long. Look, just quickly, you've heard a lot about CO2. Of all the CO2 that's in the atmosphere at 420 parts per million, mankind only contributes about 10% of that. Maybe, depending upon who's counting, maybe as little as 3%. So we're really not talking about 0.04% for those that are so interested in trying to reduce that 420 parts per million. We're talking about 0.004. What does that mean? 0.04%, where it stands at 420, in the Cajun Dome in Lafayette, where I'm from, in a 10,000 seat auditorium, that would take up about 4 seats. But if you say, well, we're really just concerned about the CO2 that mankind contributes to the atmosphere. So that's only 0.004, or not even 1 complete seat in the Cajun Dome. There is in the oceans 50 times more CO2 in the oceans than there are in the atmosphere. So the Earth as itself contributes a lot of CO2 to the atmosphere. The oceans release it when they warm, and they contract, they absorb it when the oceans cool. I don't know if you can see the little graph at the bottom that goes for the last 100 years or so. You'll see a very cyclical pattern in the Atlantic multi-decadal oscillation, multi-decadal being 10 years, multi-10-year periods. So that's your normal sequence of development right there. CO2 is released to the atmosphere as it warms, and it absorbs CO2 as it contracts. North Africa, why is that particularly blank? You see that the rest of the world is green. This particular slide comes from the NASA science editorial team. 32 authors from 24 institutions put this together and came up with the conclusion that 1/4 to half of Earth's vegetated lands has shown significant greening over the last 35 years, largely due to rising levels of atmospheric carbon dioxide. What about Africa? Why didn't it green up? Africa's unique. But the ancient Sahara Desert, somewhere between 6,500 and 10,500 years ago, there was a sudden increase in monsoon rains that transformed the region into a savanna-like environment, making it very habitable for humans and wildlife. So that lasted for a few millennia, and then it switched back. Did you cause that? Did mankind cause that? Not at all. That's the Earth doing something to itself. Richard Lindzen, one of the professors I study from MIT, he made the statement that it'll be remembered as the greatest mass delusion in the history of the world that carbon dioxide, which is the life of plants, was considered for a time to be a deadly poison. CO2 from the video is heavier than air. The first responders, when they came and found people that had been trapped in this, like you saw that particular plume that was going across the road up in Sulphur, that happened last year, because it hugs the ground, it can travel quite a ways. The notes from the first responders said that they ran across people with their doors open, flashes on, they had foam running out of their mouths. The deputy, who did not have an oxygen mask on, he fell ill. He had to be taken to the hospital. The plume can travel for over 1.5 miles. In this case, it went about 2 miles. You can see where it happened in the yellow star. That distance, you can see the 1 mile graph is right there where Satartia, the city of Satartia is. It actually crossed the Yazoo River. We were trying to get the legislative session in this past session, 2025, to limit where CO2 pipelines could be put next to a community, home, schools. We wanted it to be like 2,500 feet, at least. But every time it came up, it was nixed, and they limited it to only 500 feet. That's not very far, folks. Mike showed you this particular slide of how many times this particular pipeline from Denbury has ruptured. 13 leaks in 17 years. One was just last year around Sulphur, Louisiana. And that's the amounts. That's the same slide that Mike showed. I put this slide up because that's the facility, a compressor station, that as the law stands now, the mineral code will allow a CO2 operator of a pipeline to put this on your property without asking you for permission. This is really what got our goats. You're probably here for the same reason, because that really sticks in your craw. It stuck in our craw. We didn't like it one bit. The groundwater, this is from Anthony in Graphia, a TED Talk. There was where we had our oil and gas producing well, there was a leaking well to the surface. Looked just like this. There was water in the cellar around the casing, and you could see bubbles coming up. That particular well was allowing gas from the Austin Chalk to come on up to the surface. Well, how often does that occur? This particular graph here will show you the well age in years from 0 to 30, and then the years from 0 to 60 on the left side of the graph. After 4 years, you're up to about 25%, 4 or 5 years, 25% of all the wells in the study. And look, this was a pretty large study. There's many of these studies. It's not just this one. Up to 75,000 wells studied. 25% of those after 4 or 5 years are going to start leaking age-related, degraded cement sheath. After 17 years, you're up to 58%. Well, folks, that is the likelihood of failure, not the likelihood of success. So when they tell you, LSU folks will come out, and some UL people, PhDs, they will come out and they will tell you, look, we're going to stick this CO2 below impermeable, it's going to be below impermeable shale zones. We're going to stick it into a sand. There's no way that it can come back up. But that's just not the case, because Louisiana has been converted into a pincushion of wells. We've got over 400,000 active and inactive wells. It's almost half and half. Most of these particular zones of being CO2 injection zones are close to older wells. This particular picture is from the Pecos County, where you've got this EOR, Enhanced Oil Recovery Project, where they've been sticking CO2 in the ground to bring oil up from the ground. That's fine. They've been successfully doing that for years. The problem is that some of those old wells, that CO2 stair-stepped its way into some of the older wells and made its way back to the surface, and it was spewing out. That lake right there is over 60 acres from a well that is spewing out toxic saline water from CO2 enhanced oil recovery right there. the general manager of the Middle Pecos Groundwater Conservation District, said it will take about $50 to $100 million to clean this up. It's toxic, it's deadly. Now you can see that on the surface, but imagine that happening where you cannot see it in the groundwater. Imagine that happening, getting into the Chico Aquifer, because the Chico Aquifer runs from about 200 feet below the surface to about 1,400 feet down in Cameron Parish. So if you inject that anywhere within the 15 parishes or more that have the Chico Aquifer, you're running the risk, just like I said, you probably have a 58% chance, according to the data, that that CO2 is going to find its way back to the surface. So they are trying to put this CO2 in areas where it's not going to be around wells, but it's not only wells, it is faults. There are so many faults that come all the way back to the surface. Faults itself can be used as a migration pathway for CO2 to come all the way back. I have seen it seismically, where how these faults can be used that way. And if you have a fault that's very close to a crawfish pond or another aquifer, there was in West Texas, well, I don't know about how far in Texas it was, but the PhD hydrogeologist that I went to school with, Bruce Darling, I called him up last week and he told me that there was an injection well for gas that they had created about 5 years ago, and it finally made its way into a school where you were trying to get water, fresh water out, and what they got was gas. This one in Crane County doesn't even have a wellhead on it, and it's shooting about 100 or 200 feet up in the air. It's not just CO2, heavy metals that come with it. Look, geologists there and well-controlled experts have said that there's a great need for a great assessment to be done for over 500,000 acres. Why? Because you have a high risk of crossflow, posing catastrophic risk to groundwater tables. And that's many geologists that have come together that have made that statement. Now, I knew this when I first talked to the legislative committee. I just knew, based upon how they were going about it, they were going to end up in some kind of a catastrophic mess, because they wanted to inject in the very places where we don't put cement. We're concerned about putting cement at the bottom of the casing. They wanted to inject CO2 from 4,500 feet all the way down to 13,000. You're going to run it, I can promise you, you're going to run into many, many places where CO2 is not going to be sealed in a sealed condition. This is the Exxon Hummingbird, Allen Parish, Class 5 test. It's only going down to 7,500 feet. I'll plug this into my software program that I use for seismic data, and you can see every injection zone they likely want to inject into. Those are massive sands, and there is no faulting that I can see in this area. You know, so why in the world would you want to put CO2 in the ground where there's no actual seal? In the beginning, they said that this was going to create its own seal. But it's not, it doesn't, and you had UL professors trying to say that it's going to turn into rock, but a very small portion of that actually turns into rock. This is just a four-way closure. This is what I would like them to do. If you're going to put CO2 in the ground, put it into a four-way closure, but that is not what they're doing. They're putting it into what we refer to as monoclinal dip. You can see the CO2 in the bottom of that particular stretch, and it's just going to keep rising, just like oil and gas does. It's not going to find its own seal over time. DOE funded this research, and they can tell you that they concluded after CO2 is injected into the ground in the sequestration stage, that only a small fraction of the CO2 becomes rock. But yet I've heard with my own ears the legislators were testifying that that's what they were told by the so-called experts, that CO2 was going to provide its own seal. Now, I knew better because I've been doing this for 45 years and I've seen so many gas leaks and I've seen hydrocarbons escape. So if hydrocarbons can escape from a well, they can certainly escape in this zone, in this manner of trying to sequester CO2. The conclusion from Charles Harvey, who was a professor at MIT, stated that geological CO2 storage is an experimental project allowing private interests to risk the safety of public resources, is not justified by science or engineering. We're going to try to get him as one of our expert witnesses. I will gladly aid help him if we can get him to testify for us. So that's the end of this. Thank you so much for your time.
You have just gone without a presentation?
I've got one too.
Okay.
This forward it.
Yeah, it does.
Sorry, folks. There you go. Thanks, Mike. Hey, good evening, everybody. I'm John West. I'm from Vernon Parish. Quick disclaimer, in case you look me up on Facebook later or whatever, I'm here as a citizen, a resident of Louisiana, excuse me. I'm a citizen of the United States, a resident of Louisiana. Anything I say here is not to be considered as part of my employer, so I'm here on my own. There's my background. I don't have 40 years of experience like some of these folks. I've only got 13 in the environmental field. My degree's in environmental management. It's a Bachelor of Science degree. You see some of the things that I deal with there: permitting, Clean Water Act. Big one for me is the National Environmental Policy Act. It's an all-encompassing thing. When I look at things, what this degree does, what it allows me to do is I look at things from a holistic ecosystem level. I'm not looking at the tree, I'm looking at the forest, if you will. 13 years experience because I spent the first 20 years of my life, my adult life, as an infantryman in the United States Army. Multiple combat tours, retired, and then been doing this ever since. So you heard tonight a couple of times, about shipping all this stuff to Europe and Asia and different places. Folks, I try to be real calm about life, but as an American and as a soldier who's fought, I get a little upset when I hear Europe demands something from America, or they demand something from Asia demands something from us. We spent, the current administration had a huge deal with Europe for a bunch of LNG. There was absolutely no requirement for low or no carbon fuel. That whole deal was made to divert away from the reliance on Russia for their energy requirements. I want to read something real quick before I get to my slides, if you don't mind for a second. This is, I pulled this down today. This is the mission statement. As an old Army guy, I got to have a mission statement. This is the mission statement from LDNR until they change their name tomorrow. The mission of the Department of Energy and Natural Resources is to ensure and promote sustainable and responsible use of the natural resources of our state so they are available for the enjoyment and benefit of our citizens now and in the future. I want you to notice it does not say cater to industry requirements. It does not say cater to changing markets. It says manage our natural resources so we, as citizens of Louisiana, can enjoy our natural resources and our environment. All right, I'm going to go through a bunch of these real quick. Permitting is a very tedious thing. Nobody likes to sit and read these things. I get it. I don't like doing it all the time either. Go ahead. Oh, I guess I can do it. What I've done is I broke down in 4 parishes. I'm concentrating on rural Louisiana particularly. So you're looking at Allen Parish, Beauregard, Vernon, and Rapides. I highlighted in bold Allen because that's where we're at. These are Class 5 wells. It's important to note that a Class 5 well, per the permit, does not allow for any injection of any fluid for carbon dioxide. They're not allowed to inject in a Class 5 well. But I want you to notice, if you see this, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines. Here's your Class 6 list. Those ones in yellow, they're not on the front list, right? I happen to run into a representative from, or an employee, if you will, from Capture Point who's working to get this done in Vernon Parish. And the well there for Rapides does not have a Class 5 well. What they told me is they're trying to use the data from the Vernon Parish well as the source to validate the requirement for the Class 6 well in Rapides Parish. I'm not a geologist, and I'm not going to put Brad on the spot, but I know where the well in Vernon is, and I know where the well in Rapides is planning to go,
there's quite a bit of distance in between them. And I know technology is good, but I don't think it's that good quite yet. And what I want you to pay attention to here is, you see the status column towards the right middle there. There's a few steps. So first they apply, then the Department of Energy and Natural Resources will go through what they call administrative review, and they'll determine that it's administratively complete. Basically what it's saying is, you've got all your paperwork here, we can start. That's a pretty quick process. Then it goes into a technical review. That's where they take 12, 18, 24 months. Some of these have been in there since 23, 24, when the state got issued primacy. Here's the well, what it looks like in Allen Parish, right? So you got the mockingbird, the hummingbird, and you have the yams MLR. What I want you guys to do, if you have a chance, I'll leave this on the back table. If possible, get the light for 1 second. And what I want you to do is look at this. This is their permit package for their Class 6 well as it stands right now. And you see all that black? There's black all through here, right? Those are called redactions, all right? When we get to the end, I'm going to tell you some things that you can do right now while the public comment period is not open. You can still do things right now. Go ahead and kill the lights. Next, and then we'll go through these two next ones real quick. Oops, that's mine. I keep forgetting I can do this. I'm not very smart, I'm a retired infantryman. Here's what it looks like in Rapides. You'll notice that they have one up near northwest corner of Rapides. That's for an energy production area up by Clico. This is what their permit, Class 6 permit for capture point looks like for their other one down there by Kincaid Lake. They don't even want you to look at the middle of Louisiana to see where this stuff is at, right? So what I did is I went onto this link, and I'm like everybody else, I'm going to give you a link where I get my information. I'm not making this stuff up. CCUS map, it's kind of gone rogue on us. They've blocked a lot of stuff out, but you can see the two proposed areas right there for Rapides Parish. Here's what it looks like in Vernon. Capture point up in the top left. That well is already in the ground. That is literally 3 miles from my house as the crow flies. Vernon Parish on the bottom, that's near Picken, Louisiana. About 6 miles just outside of town. And then the one that's not in the ground yet is right off of LA 28, about 2 miles from a major intersection of Highway 171 and 28, both 4-lane highways. Looking at the fallouts and the risk that you've seen, it's probably not the best place to look for one of these. A lot of people, and I didn't realize this until very recently, so we have a lot of beautiful national forests. Kisatchie National Forest, a bunch of different districts and ranger districts that fall into that. They're federal lands. Different things have to happen in order to do things on federal lands. But what happened in November of 2023 was the U.S. Forest Service put a proposed rule in the Federal Register, which was where all the federal actions have to go through. And they made a proposed rule to exempt carbon capture and sequestration activities from their perpetual land use rule, meaning something that's going to be there forever. They ran that public comment period between November and it closed on 2 January 2024, right over the holiday period, while everybody's out doing everything else but thinking about what carbon capture sequestration is, right? So that comment period is closed, but as of today, and I double-checked today, as of today, the U.S. Forest Service, the United States Department of Agriculture, USDA, has not issued a final rule on that determination yet. I highly encourage folks, reach out to the Kisatchie National Forest Supervisor's Office in Pineville, reach out to your district office, your ranger district office around here, whether it's Evangeline or the Catahoula or whichever one, wherever you're from, right? And let them know that we may not have known about this during the public comment period, but we're tracking now. We know exactly what's going on, and we are significantly opposed, highly opposed, to doing these type of activities on our pristine national forests, which are there for the enjoyment and recreational use of the people of the state of Louisiana. All right. Told you I'm going to get through these quick. So when I look at things, I watch not only what the state's doing, but I'm looking at what the federal government's doing. And there's 3 things I really want to point out on these. So we talked about, I think it was Mike talking about the stacks blowing the CO2 out with their emissions. That was basically rescinded or getting ready to be rescinded. That was called the endangerment finding. It was signed in by the Obama administration in 2009. It was a huge driver for the electric vehicle mandate that the Trump administration just did away with. So that really focuses on a lot of emissions related to trucks and tractors. And if you drive a big diesel, like I've got one for my farm, you know, you got that DEF in it now that just makes everything really hard to deal with. So that deals with that. The next one is where I really want people to focus, right? If you can do anything and you want to see something that's happening, there's tomorrow, as a matter of fact, 1 October, the link, you can find it right there, epa.gov, GHG reporting. This is a big one. This is going to impact a lot of things that happen with CCS. This is a reconsideration of the greenhouse gas reporting program. Currently, what has to happen is these companies who transmit CO2 via pipeline to either EOR or potentially a CCS site, they're supposed to report how much left that facility, how much made it to the injection site, and how much went in the ground. It's perfect world, that number would be the same, but we know, based on conversations tonight, those pipelines leak. You have to maintain them, so you have to let some of it off. So it's not always going to be the same number. The only thing that I saw in it, it's 28 pages long. It's a relatively long proposed rule. The one thing that jumped out to me was the only one that I saw being exempted that would still have to report are oil and gas distribution facilities. The key term is distribution, and what the EPA is going to define distribution as. If you have time, I'd recommend logging onto that tomorrow. Listen in on and see what it says. The public comment period does not close until 3 November. It's a 60-day comment period, which is relatively long. So you got plenty of time to look at this and read through the ruling and listen to what's going on. Unfortunately, it's too late to register as a speaker or as a commenter during the public hearing. The last one there, Department of Energy actually proposed this rule through the Federal Register, and I had a laugh when I read it, you know, and I think Michael agree with me, Mike Nichols will. It says, determination of impacts of greenhouse gases on the U.S. climate. Folks, the U.S. does not have a climate, right? In and of itself, that's an inaccurate statement, right? So, but they're getting ready to make their rule, I would say probably the next couple, 3 months, to see what that looks like. But it all drives back to, do we need to capture carbon dioxide and inject it in the ground? As a scientist, doing things that I've done for the last 13 years, I'm telling you, Brad used the term catastrophic. Folks, this is lining up to be the biggest ecological disaster in the state of Louisiana. If the state of Louisiana DNR executes it like they're talking about, it's going to be probably the biggest disaster, ecological disaster. Before I get to this slide, we talked about the cheat code, and I want to talk about the permits in relation to the cheat code. Last I counted, there was 104 Class 6 permits. It's 33 applications, 104 Class 6 wells. Of those 104 Class 6 wells, about 50% of those wells are proposed to be either in the cheat code itself or in the recharge zone of the cheat code aquifer. The cheat code aquifer, according to the United States Geological Survey, the USGS, the cheat code aquifer, as of 2021, provides 48% of the state's groundwater for industrial, agricultural, and public consumption of water. 48%. And their plan is to put 50% of those 104 wells right in that aquifer. You know, we deal with risk every day. We wake up, we turn on the light, we mitigated risk from not running into a wall. The question is, what is acceptable risk? That's the question that needs to be answered. Because in my opinion, as a scientist, putting 50% of your proposed wells in an aquifer that provides 50% of your groundwater for your state is an asinine idea. Absolutely asinine. So everybody wants to know, what can I do now, right? A lot of us, you know, when we first got into this, we were waiting for those public hearings, we're waiting to talk to DNR and the companies, and we're waiting to, you know, open the public comment period so we can rant and rave, and, you know, they think that we're banshees and just run around and causing problems. We're just concerned. We are literally worried about this. There's the website to DNR, right? You go there. Right on the front page, at the very bottom, you're going to see 2 things. General questions. If you have a general question about how the process works, email Patrick Kurgis at la.gov. If you have a specific question on a specific project, right underneath that, injection-mining at la.gov. And you can ask specific questions. You do not have to wait until a permit goes out for public commenting to email them and ask them questions. Do it now, do it often, and hit them up every time. We need to start getting answers in writing because they're gonna change their process, they're gonna change their mind, and we need to have it documented of what we asked. For example, I listed a few what you can talk about. Redactions and confidential business information. So all those redactions I just showed you in this document, right? They're blacking them out because they're saying they're confidential business information, right? Here's my opinion. You do not deem that packet administratively complete until you have cleared all redacted pieces that are not related to confidential business information. Because there's a lot in there that does not have anything to do with their confidential business. Move public hearings to the front end. Folks, right now the way it works is when they open a public comment period for 30 days, and many of us have seen this, the public hearing is scheduled 1 day before the public comment period closes. 1 day, right? So we need to tell them to move that public hearing to the front half. Within the first 2 weeks of that 30-day period, move it to the front half. That's going to spark interest. That's going to let us talk amongst each other, formulate a plan, and to their point, to their benefit, what it's going to do is get better public input and more focused input so that they can understand what our concerns are and get our answers that we are due. Hey, this next one really hit me hard. Look, I don't think we're going to have a problem here in Allen Parish at all. I know Roland and I've met a lot of the police jury. Look, it happened in St. Landry. Do not let your police jury tell DNR to hold their public hearing in Baton Rouge. St. Landry Parish did that. Somehow, I convinced DNR to give me the email that took place on. I have a copy of that email from the parish president of St. Landry to DNR stating, hold our permits for Class 5 wells in Baton Rouge. It is your parish. They need to come to you. It's up to the company to find out where to hold the meeting. It should not be up to your police jury to accommodate them and find them someplace to do it. And that's their job. Socioeconomic data under the National Environmental Policy Act, that's a whole section. Look, there's like 5 whopping environmental questions they ask in these permits. I literally cried and laughed at the same time when I started reading through them. You know, make them prove their data. All they're going to say is that the socioeconomic benefits outweigh the environmental risk. That's their answer. That's it. Okay, prove it. How? Class 5 well data once complete. So what I did about 3 weeks ago, I emailed DNR and I requested, you saw that little squiggly line, I call it the EKG readout that Brad shared. I asked for that data from the Class 5 well in Simpson, and I asked for that Class 5 well data from Picken, Louisiana. I asked for it 3 weeks ago. I followed up a week after. They said, I'm still looking for it. Followed up 2 weeks, let me ask him again. Last Friday was 3 weeks. I still don't have an answer. Folks, I deal with the Freedom of Information Act in my job. If I took 3 weeks to provide a public request for information that should be readily available, and it took me 3 weeks, it's either not there or they're hiding something. One of the two, right? If you see something, right? Yes, the EPA issued the state of Louisiana primacy. That happened unofficially. The final rule was in November of 23. It actually took effect in February of 2024. That was when the effective date was. But EPA Region 6 still has the authority to oversee what's happening in the state of Louisiana, right? They have that right. So if you see something wrong, please say something. Just 2 more quick points, I think, and then I'm going to get off here because I know I'm taking too long. I think it was Mike or Brad, I can't remember. So I've had to correct DNR 3 times on this now. They have told us that everything in that waste stream that's coming across the pipeline is going to be CO2. Folks, from a scientific or an engineering standpoint, that is 100% impossible to do when you're removing something from an industrial source. There will be other constituents of concern based on that industrial activity. I have seen and read some of the waste stream compositions. The one that I will emulate real quick is the one in Hackberry, that Class 6 that just got permitted. So they got their permit. It said 98.3% CO2, 1.6% CH4, which is methane, so we already know it's natural gas. But then it said 0.01% other. 0.01% in and of itself is a very small number, right? Let's talk math. 2 million metric tons per year is what's proposed to go inside that well. 0.01 times 2 million metric tons is 2,000 metric tons. Yeah, 2,000. And then you times that by the lifespan of the project of 20 years, you're now talking 40,000 metric tons of other stuff. Folks, that's one well. Remember what I said at the beginning. There's 104 planned wells across the state of Louisiana encompassing 18 parishes. This is not going to go well if it happens. I'm not trying to give you a doomsday brief or anything like that, but I've looked at this from about 18 different angles as an environmental guy, and I cannot find any benefit to the people. I cannot find any benefit to the environment. All I can see is a benefit to industry to make billions and billions more dollars. That is the only thing there. Folks, I'll stick around for a little while afterwards as well. I'll put this back on the back table. I'll leave it there. Y'all can have it. And appreciate y'all coming out tonight. It is this important.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you all for coming tonight to hear about CCS. My name is Frances Cannon. I've been a licensed real estate sales agent since 1980 and received my broker's license in the late 1990s. So I've been in this business for quite a while. So far tonight, you've heard about the risk associated with carbon transportation by pipeline and the risk associated with injecting it into the ground. What will happen to property values after CO2 operations crank up in our area, our parish, throughout our state? I wish I had a crystal ball, but I've spoken with many other realtors, real estate attorneys, and this morning I spoke with our parish tax assessor, Mr. Lewis Williams. CO2 or CCS technology at this level is new and unproven. Will there be incidents or accidents associated with CO2 transportation and injection? We believe there will be. Will CO2 have a negative environmental impact? We believe it will, as you've heard tonight. Is there fear and unpredictability about property values should CO2 operations begin in our area? Eminent domain, you heard about that. They have the right to take your property and put a pipeline in. They have a right to take your property and inject into it. The fact regarding no more drilling, as Brad spoke about, once they start injecting the CO2, there'll probably be no more possibility of drilling for oil and gas. All of these things affect property values. Yes, any of these situations can have a negative impact on values. It is impossible to predict future property values. We will not be able to confirm whether CO2 affects them or not until after CO2 operations begin and real estate sales close or finalize. Over my lifetime, values have creeped up. I've never seen a decline in real estate values in our area. In conclusion, though, you've heard a lot of stuff tonight. With the possibility of CO2 operations, there is now grave concern over property values dropping, especially if we have a dangerous incident, which several of them spoke about tonight. I will be available to answer any questions afterwards during the question and answer session. And again, thank you all for coming.
So I want you to take a look over there. There are two maps, one on the far end and one in the center, and there's a big orange spot, one in the middle. You know what that is? Somebody say it out loud. Not anybody up here. What is that? Big old orange spot. That is the Chico Aquifer. Now you go find your house in there and you tell me that you want to have some poison pumped down in the ground into your water source. We can talk about economic development all we want, but the fact is, if that water is poisoned, there will be no economic development for anybody. Our land will be worthless to make money, to live on, and for our posterity. That's the big point that I'm going to bring to you tonight, and that is I'm going to be talking about the Save My Louisiana section. We are the legal arm of the entire coalition against CCS in Louisiana, and welcome to the coalition, because you're a part of it. And the reason you have to be a part of it is because this is your land. And in our land, we have property rights to own it. It is ours. It is the wealth of our posterity. It's how we continue with our wealth throughout the generations. My people have been, I'm from up around Ruby, Louisiana. Ruby is just southeast of Pineville, a little east spot in there, about 500 people counting cows. Not too many people down there, but we're there. We've been there for a long time, a couple hundred years. And all those years, that land has been turned over again and again and again. I'm the only one that left. As my background, I finished school over there, went to LC, finished LC, went off to the Air Force. I retired from the Air Force as a colonel. I was a commander, 2 theaters of war, all kind of stuff. I come home, and this is what I find. And let's talk about what I find. In 2020, well, let's start back before that. In 1974, we redid our Constitution. We rewrote our Constitution. The Constitution of Louisiana for 1974 was written, and it was written to do 3 things. What are those 3 things? Okay, what else? Property, life, liberty. What is the point of government? Our Constitution says that we, the people of Louisiana, have gotten together and we are going to constitute a government. We built a document that on top of that document, we built a government. The creator is the document. And who created the document? We did. The creation is the government. Now, I don't know about where you came from, but where I came from, the creation doesn't tell the creator what to do. It goes the other way around. You own the government. And when we got together and we said we wanted to create this government, we said the purpose of that government is to protect our life, our liberty, and our property. Protect our right to those things. This is not a right that the government gives us. The government's job is to protect that right. Who gives us that right? God Himself gives us that right. That is the tradition of our entire nation and what our federal government is based on and what all of our state governments are based on. So this is what our Constitution says. It says the people of Louisiana desire to protect individual rights to life, liberty, and property. That's in our preamble. The very first thing we wrote, we said we want to create a government that's going to protect these things. The purpose of government in Article 1, the rights are life, liberty, and property. And the purpose of government is to protect those, to protect our right to those things. All government is instituted to protect the rights of the individual. Listen to this is what our Constitution says. The only legitimate ends of government is to protect those rights, and those rights are unalienable, which means they cannot be taken away from you. They cannot be separated from you. They're unalienable by the state and preserved inviolate. So you can't violate those rights. Further, in Article 1, Paragraph 2, no person shall be deprived of their life and liberty. See, are you getting the point here? We created a government to protect the rights. We said that is the point of government. Government has no other point other than that. And then we say that you've got to make sure you're going to do it. No person will be deprived. It does say that you can be deprived of those rights by due process of law. There is a provision of how your property can be taken away from you, how your life can be taken away from you. and how your liberty can be taken away from you. You first must be indicted, accused of a crime. You must then be adjudicated of that indictment, and then a jury of your peers have to decide whether or not you're guilty of it. And then the laws that we have will prescribe what the judgment is. That's due process. Let me tell you what due process is not. The state of Louisiana's legislature is created by what? What created that body? You can say it out loud. The Constitution. The Constitution is the creator. The legislature is the created. The created doesn't tell the creator what to do. And our Constitution says in Article 1, Section 4, very clearly. Here we go. Right to property. Property shall not be taken or damaged by the state or its political subdivisions, except for public purpose. I'm going to come back to that. And with just compensation paid to the owner or into court for his benefit, except as specifically authorized in Article 6, Section 21. We'll talk about what that exception is. Property shall not be taken or damaged by the state or its political subdivisions. A, for predominant use by any private person or entity. B, for transfer of ownership to any private person or entity. Is anybody unclear about the words on the page? Anybody? Seems pretty clear to me. Article 1, paragraph 4, section 4 further defines the limits of what public purpose is. So it actually starts telling you, I'm going to tell you what public purpose is all about. And how you, if we decide that for some reason we need to take your land to build a highway or a bridge, we've got to define exactly how that's going to be done. There are limits to it. Now that Article 6, Section 23 says that we can help out industry, but it can only be at a public place, a public port. It cannot be just anywhere it wants to be. It's all limited. Isn't that wonderful? Great Constitution that we really do have. Okay, so let's talk about what this thing about eminent domain is. Everybody's heard about it, right? Maybe not. Expropriated property. That's when they come along and they decide, I'm going to build a highway through here, and we have determined that it's judicial, that it's proper, that we can do it. It's a public purpose. Now, public purpose, by the way, is a judicial question, not a legislative question. The legislature cannot determine that what they are going to do is for the public purpose. They don't have the authority. The Constitution didn't give them the authority. So the judicial will decide whether or not it can be done, and then the state comes to you, sir, we'd like to build a highway through your property, we're going to have to buy some of it. And you say, well, I don't want that. Well, we're going to go through, there's a court proceeding we have to go through. It's all lined out there. The law. We hear that all the time, no one's above the law, right? Well, there is a law. And the legislature cannot change that law, because that law is the Constitution. It tells us exactly what we can and cannot do. Nowhere in the Constitution is the legislature given the power to take away your right to property. They cannot. As a matter of fact, in one section, in section 13, it even prohibits the legislature specifically from doing that. And yet here we have what's called Act 61. Let me talk to you about Act 61. In 2020, in the middle of all the chaos that was going across the nation, with racist riots, ginned up racist riots everywhere, with the onset of COVID coming along, your legislators decided that they were going to give somebody the right of eminent domain. I've read a few things for you, and I want you to go to la.gov and look at your own Constitution. I want you to go read it. No one is beyond the capacity to understand the words on those pages. It's pretty simple. But the legislature in 2020, 100% of them decided that they were going to pass Act 61. Well, let me just read what Act 61 says, if you've never heard it. First time I heard this, I about lost my mind. All right, 1108 in the paragraph. Any storage operator is hereby authorized, after obtaining any permit and any certificate of public conveyance and necessity from the commissioner required by this chapter, to exercise the power of eminent domain. Your legislators gave a private company the right to come to your property and tell you that you are going to give them your property. They have to pay you whatever the market rate is. They get to decide that. But you don't have a choice. That's the law. Act 61, 2020. Do you know that that law also, later on, in paragraph 1110, gives foreign entities the same authority? If I show up from pick a country, and hey, I'd surely like that 80 acres you have, or you know what, it's not my problem, I live in a subdivision, I've only got my 0.2 acres, but I like that subdivision, and we're going to put a pipe right through it. Or we're going to need some of your subsurface property rights. So we're going to take that from you. Oh, no, Mr. German guy, you can't do that. Oh, but the Louisiana legislature in Act 61 in 2020 says that I have the authority to exercise the power of eminent domain. Absolutely insanity. So this is what we're dealing with. The Save Louisiana section is we are the legal arm of what we're going to do. That means lawsuits. There are lots of ways we can deal with this. We want you to know about all the science behind it because you need to know how it's going to affect your water. But I want you to know how it affects your property rights and how that affects your posterity and the long-term wealth of everything that you've worked for and everything that you want to hand to the next generation. I don't know about you, but I don't want to hand it to ExxonMobil. 1 minute. So we met with some lawyers this morning, and within the next 10 or so days, we are going to drop a lawsuit in the state of Louisiana for the unconstitutionality of section of the law, Act 61. We are telling them that the Constitution restricts you from making any rules, making any law that allows a private individual, whether it's you taking my land or some company coming and taking your land. Can't do that. Number two, we're going to be initiating laws for conservation issues, all environmental laws. We're going to sue about the aquifer. We're going to sue about environmental impact. We're going to sue about those kind of pieces as well. Number three, and if you're someone in this room who has signed a lease already to one of these companies, they lied to you. They can take your surface and your subsurface. And if they lied to you and you don't understand what they said, we want to know who you are, because that's the third arm of our legal action, is we're going to sue those companies because they lied to you. So that's what I've got to say about that. My time is obviously out. One last thing. There's no such thing as free. Nothing is free. We're going to need money. Save My Louisiana is going to have a funding site available to it. What are we going to do with that money? You're going to be able to see everywhere every dime goes. We're not hiding it from anybody. None of us are getting paid. We're giving our time, and a lot of us are giving our money. But lawyers cost money. Experts cost money. A lot of men and women are giving their time because it's our land, but we've got to pay for it all. There's a lot of things we've got to pay for. So we're going to be asking for some money. But we also want you to be involved in talking to other people. Find out what this is about. Lots of websites, lots of places. When you talk to your neighbors, you need to help them understand that. This is about our land. This is about our water. And this is about our future. What are you going to do?
Man, that was going to be hard to follow up. I don't know about y'all. I think I got some PTSD with those lights going out and it getting dark and coming back on. Reminds me of my old honky-tonk days when they'd call last call and them lights would flip on and there's bright lights. So I'm glad no lights are going to be going off anymore. I'm Renee Savant, but when I'm in this neck of the woods, I'm Renee Savant. My father was born in 1911 in Indian Village, and he left as a young man, went to Texas, found my mom, that's why I talk the way I do, threw her across his shoulder and carried her back to this part of the woods, and I was raised in Southwest Louisiana. But I'm here this afternoon on behalf of the Louisiana CO2 Alliance and the CO2 Chronicles. The first part is I'm going to speak words for those that have been silenced and for those that cannot speak. I'm going to speak words for them. Industry is now trying to cut deals with local officials, but let's be honest. Why didn't they bring those same offers back during the legislative session? The answer is very clear. On September the 10th, Governor Landry said that when it comes to CO2 injection wells, if we don't want them in our parish, we don't get them. So why the rush now? Because industry is racing ahead, trying to lock in agreements with local governments before October 10th, the 30-day window the governor himself asked for. And what are most of those discussions about? Always the same, money. But money should be the last thing on the list. Here's what must become first. The people must decide, not the state and not local government. Pipeline setbacks, CO2 pipelines must be kept away from homes, schools. Eminent domain must be completely removed from CO2 projects. Accountability. Strict oversight for injection wells and pipelines. Landowner rights, fair compensation for stranded mineral rights. Liability, no caps and full insurance coverage for public water systems and private wells. First responders, training and equipment paid for by industry, plus community notification systems in case of a leak. And then, money. So let me ask you, are we really going to strike a deal with the same industry that sued us and that fought against every single bill designed to protect our parishes? The only deal that carries real authority is the one the governor makes through legislation. Police juries are the last line of defense because government overreach and the people and the governor's own words matter. September the 10th, he said, quote, "If you don't want it, you won't get it," end quote. And that was the governor's words. The people of Allen Parish have made it clear that they've shown up to meeting after meeting, voicing strong opposition to the CO2 injection projects, and next Monday night, at the Allen Parish Police Jury meeting, there will be a resolution calling on the governor to reject any Class 6 permit unless the people of Allen Parish approve it first. October 10th is just around the corner. If the resolution passes, it will send a loud and clear message. Allen Parish does not want Class 6 permits, and the governor must remember this. And that's why we cannot let industry write the rules or buy their way into the parish. The people deserve the truth, and the truth is always easy to find. And that is where the CO2 Chronicles come in. The CO2 Chronicle is our watchdog. It represents all parishes throughout the state of Louisiana. It's independent journalism with no corporate filters or industry money. We're following the Freedom of Information request. We're going behind doors. We're trying to get the answers. And we want the stories told. If you go to the Chronicles and we want the individuals in the parishes, because every parish has a different story. They're not all the same. Everyone has CCS, but everybody's story is not the same. If you go to the CO2 Chronicles, go into the newsroom, it has a section, got a tip. If you will click that, if something comes up in Allen Parish, in your parish, and you want, you think there needs to be a story on it, let us know, and we will cover it. So, with all that said, we want to remember that together we can defend our land, our water, and our rights. Thank you.
Hello, for y'all that don't know me, I'm Joe Perkins. I'm a police juror in District 4 here in Allen Parish. I just wanted to come tonight, Ms. Renee kind of covered everything. We got that resolution we bring in Monday night, and I'd appreciate it if y'all would show up and support behind it. It really means a lot. I know a lot of people think Allen Parish Police Jury kind of gave up after they tried to sue us, Exxon, but I just want to let y'all know in the surrounding parishes that we hadn't. We're still there fighting for y'all. And this is what that resolution is for y'all's family, mine. We're trying to still fight them. I mean, I wish I could have went in the room where our lawyer, Exxon's lawyer, showed up. Our engineer was there. The ordinance that they was trying to sue us over, I was pushing it. But I wasn't invited to go in that room where they all met. Why? I don't know. Because I would have sat there and looked Exxon in the eye and told them, I'm not giving in. Go ahead and sue me. Do what you want to do. Because what they was trying to sue us over was the ordinance that the legislature gave us back in 1940, gave the power to the police juries in every parish to protect the safety and the health of their people. And that's what that ordinance was for. I mean, I don't see where they could sue us over it. But again, I'm gonna make it short, 'cause I know y'all got questions and Ms. Renee covered. But that's okay, that's good. So if y'all would just come out and support us, and we haven't gave up for y'all, we still fight. So.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's always good to be last. I guess they always save the best for last. Now, that's actually a joke. My name is Chris Alexander. I came up with my good friend Bert Calais from Baton Rouge today. My organization is Louisiana Citizen Advocacy Group. We got a great supporter of ours sitting right there, Mr. Jim Crumley. It's good to see you. I love working with these groups here. Ms. Renee, Mr. Guillory, that's your name? I really enjoyed your remarks. Brad has been on our podcast. We got the State of Freedom podcast that's going all over the state of Louisiana. And we're going to have to get you on there too, John, one day soon. Hopefully we will. Our organization is focused on one thing, and that is making sure that people like you and people just like you all over the state of Louisiana know exactly what your senators and your representatives that you voted for are doing in our legislature. What they are doing. Because I can assure you, not only on carbon capture sequestration, but on other issues as well that are fundamentally important, all across the board. So often when they come talk to you, I notice they're not here. So assuming they come talk to you, they're not going to be telling you that they facilitated the acquisition of your property for an experimental science being paid for with our tax dollars. They're not going to come tell you that. They're going to tell you everything that you want to hear. And the reason why we continue to have the problems in our legislature over and over and over again is that nobody wants to name the legislators, the senators, and the representatives who are selling you out for a bill of goods. They don't want you to know who they are. And we're going to be in St. Tammany next week. We're going to be in Caddo Parish the week after that, Jefferson Parish, and we're going to be naming the names just like we are here tonight. Now, Ms. Aquila was kind enough to give me a few minutes, and I'm certainly not going to go over time, but I do want to tell you now, we passed out a legislative summary of how Senator Heather Cloud voted 23, 24, 25 on carbon capture sequestration, and also Representative DeWitt Carrier. And in our humble estimation, based upon their votes on this particular issue, I'm not sure that they've earned your reelection. I'm not sure that they've earned your support going forward. As Mr. Guillory so eloquently said a little while ago, they have enabled, and they're only 2 of 73 Republicans. DeWitt is 1 of 73 Republicans in the House, a supermajority, and Senator Cloud is 1 of 29 senators, a supermajority, in the Senate. So they didn't do it by themselves, but the bottom line is this: they absolutely codified in law the right of private organizations to seize private property to enrich themselves, to benefit themselves economically for an activity that we're largely paying for and that is potentially very hazardous, as Mr. LeWan and many others have told you already. So we've got to mention names. I encourage you to view this legislative summary. There's like a total of 18 bills on here going back to 2023. They didn't always vote the wrong way on everything, but on the fundamental things, on eminent domain specifically, we wouldn't be here if private corporations were not authorized by our legislature to come take your property. Senator Cloud and Representative Carrier voted in favor of that, to allow that to happen. Does it mean they're bad people? No. Does it mean we have any personal animus toward them? Absolutely not. But you have a right to know what they're doing and what they're not doing, and on this most important issue, they are not being faithful to the Constitution. I carry this around with me every single place I go. The pocket constitutionalist, and everything we do is based on whether it's authorized by this and whether it serves your interests, not Exxon, not political bureaucrats in Baton Rouge, your interests. And I can tell you that we're building an infrastructure across the state of Louisiana whereby voters in every district are going to know what their senators and what their reps are doing in the legislature, because when we started our organization in 2022, I think, and I saw what they were doing down there, I said, if the voters in their district knew what they're really doing here, 80% of them could not be reelected to office. The problem is, until we came along, they didn't have any idea what was going on. Well, now they do know what's going on, and we have to replace a significant percentage of these rhinos and put good people in office who are loyal to the Constitution, and they have to know that they're going to get kicked out as well if they don't do the right thing. So it all comes down to who's serving you and who's not serving you. Ms. Aquila, I appreciate, please get some of our push cards. Hopefully y'all have them on the back table of CAG. And lastly, listen to our podcast, The State of Freedom. The #1 conservative political podcast in Louisiana is The State of Freedom. We love you and we're fighting for you, and it is an honor to be fighting alongside all of these people up here. God bless you.
If we could get the lights on, please. So after hearing all this information, I just have a question. With a show of hands, how many are you against CCS? All right, that's the way to go. Okay, now we're going to open the floor in an orderly manner for questions from the audience. We're going to have Keith Guillory, and we're going to have Mark Horton. Where are y'all at? And we're going to start on the east side, of the room for the first question. So if you have a question, please stand up and Keith or Mark will come over to bring you a microphone. Anybody have any questions? Question or comments? Wait, they're gonna bring you a mic. Just
Hello.
stand up, please.
Sorry. I just have a question. I am kind of building a parallel to what happened in Mighty Porn, with the sinkhole and all, and so I watched Mighty Porn disappear, and that happened when I was young. Granted, I didn't understand it, but one piece of information I was given from that was, from a friend of mine that is a lawyer, told me that sometimes these companies will send out kind of like brochure things in the mail, and that kind of is their way of getting consent. Has that happened here in the same way? You know what I'm talking about? Like, kind of like you get this in the mail that kind of tells you a little information card of what's going on, but doesn't really give you good details, but because they sent it out in the mail, it kind of serves as like their way of consenting to the public. Has there been anything like that?
It's a good question. It's one of the questions that, you know, I think John West touched on too, that we don't have enough public notification and input because they're doing things at holiday times, right, John? John, do you want to speak to her question? Because I'm personally thinking I've asked, you switch. I've asked if they could please, well, really we have to start demanding that they prove a couple of things to us. One, that CO2, where they're putting it into the ground, prove to us that there's going to be a trap, a seal for that. Number two, whatever public notification that you have, you've got to make that, send out letters, because in the oil and gas industry, we send out letters to any interested parties. We have an interested parties list, and we send that out, and you have plenty of time to respond. And you have meetings and you have discussions. This is way too concealed. You know, just like what John West showed you. There was all this redacted information. No, I told the governor personally when we met with him a couple of weeks ago, we really need to have more transparency with the government. We're not getting that. It's too important. It's a dangerous thing that you're getting ready to do. It's never been done before, especially on the scale that they want to do it. It's extremely risky what they're trying, so they have to include the public. They've got to include you, and if they're not doing it, we need you really to get involved and start calling the governor, every representative you have. John, you want to make a statement?
Yeah, I'll just touch on two things on that, right? So both from a state and a federal perspective, because I deal with federal stuff.
Excuse me, could we please keep the noise down to a level so everybody can hear, please?
What I'll say from a federal level as well, right, because I deal with the National Environmental Policy Act, we have to go to the public and get comments and entertain responses and things. It's broke. The system is broke, right? That federal law of NEPA was put into place in 1969, and it said you had to provide notice to the public and a comment period not to be less than 30 days. It varies between federal agencies. It doesn't seem like it's really a hard thing to do. We have a lot of young people inside these agencies now who are very tech savvy. Everybody has 800 different social media platforms, and it's very easy to follow somebody. Trust me, I'm following every single industry that's trying to do this in the state of Louisiana right now. If I can figure out how to contact and follow people, DNR should be putting these out on their social media platforms across the state of Louisiana, so every citizen in the state of Louisiana knows exactly when the public comment period is, when the public hearing is, because right now you have to go to their website. When you see that blue map up there, you know, well, when it was up there, excuse me, on the screen, that's on their front page of their website. You'll notice St. Landry Parish is still white. They just had public hearings for 2 Class 5 wells, for future Class 6 wells in St. Landry, and that's not even covered. They can't even keep up with their own website. And here we are, to Brad's point, trusting them to make sure that the data they're getting from industry is conducive to say that they're going to be able to do what they're going to do. That's where the public needs to come, because we have people like Brad who are scientists in the geological field. You have people like me and Mike who deal with biological and ecology type stuff so we can understand these things. We have people like everybody in this room
We need to wrap this up.
can take a
Next
look at,
question, please.
can take a look at it and give a comment. So the bottom line is the public comment period for state and federal is broke.
Thank you.
Keith, stand up, please, yes.
I just would like to say that I think a lot of people, I was included, not very long ago. I thought it was just going to be like a couple sites in Louisiana. I think people have just thought, oh, it's going to be far away and, you know, no big deal. I think there needs to be more signs and more paperwork going out showing they're inundating Louisiana. Because a lot of people don't think that. They really need to know just how bad it's going to be everywhere.
I think that can be summed up with something too real quick. So there's a website that the EPA, if you just Google EPA Class 6 tracker, right? It comes up as a dashboard. It breaks it out by state and filters it. The state of Louisiana can do the same thing, put a dashboard together and say by parish, you can click on Avoyles or St. Landry or Allen or whatever, and it can give you all the information of Class 5 permits, what is in place, what is not in place, and what's still pending. It's a doable thing. It's just, to your point, we have 18 parishes getting looked at. When you look at the EPA, they're doing all the other states that don't have primacy. There's 15 states, 240-something wells across the rest of the United States. They're trying to do 104 just in the state of Louisiana.
We'll do a better job of producing some pictures that we can provide for all the meetings that we're doing, so you can look at it and see it. Just like we do with the aquifer. So once you see it, we'll have another one like that, show you where the wells are.
Okay, I have a question about if this thing would go through, or anything like testing and all, and if something does go wrong, what is Exxon and all those people that want this thing to go through, do they have any plans, any contingency plans when they need to evacuate people? Are they going to compensate families? Because we have hurricanes and they have to evacuate, and some of these people cannot afford to just pick up and leave, you know. And so, are these people that want this, are they going to compensate these people?
So, and I'll let the lawyer get on some of that.
Your legislators lowered the liability for the companies, so it's even worse than you think. Your legislators lowered the liability for the companies that they would have for doing this. So not only did they give away your right to own property, they also gave these companies a lower liability requirement. So
and what else?
Don't you think that they should compensate these people?
Yes,
If
absolutely.
something does happen?
There's no doubt that the companies should bear a great deal of the liability. But again, you got to talk to your representative, your state representative, your state senator, and ask why they voted for legislation that lowered the liability limits for these companies that are going to be pumping this stuff in our ground.
One of the documents that should still be on the back there, it's called the Emergency Response and Remediation Plan, right? It's redacted just like the other one, but I mentioned this at a police jury meeting. In that permit, basically what it says is, based on the information we have at this time, these are the 4 most possible scenarios that would happen in a bad way. It says that in the permit, but everything that shows those 4 things that could happen is all redacted. So they're not even telling us that.
Well, I just wanted to say that if Exxon is part of this deal, Exxon has a bad record on these types of projects.
They do. Well, they did talk about generating a fund in the legislative lounge, and we attended that back earlier this year. But the amount of money they were going to put in it was only like $5 million, which I kind of chuckled right away. I said, that's not going to touch anything. You know, if you destroy somebody's livelihood, their crawfish pond or the aquifer, they were talking about in Texas spending $50 to $100 million to try to remediate that problem. So, I mean, Exxon is one of the few companies that could afford maybe taking care of a person that gets injured. But what about the other fly-by-night CO2 operators that the Colonel was talking about here that don't, you know, a lot of these companies, when they operate via 45Q tax credits, they give their executives really big salaries, and then once they get those salaries and then they kind of realize they're in a losing situation, they'll just close the company down. If the CO2 that they injected into the sands that are under your feet start to harm you, who is going to protect you? That is why we're doing what we're doing now. Because if you don't jump in the game now, it's like, who did you? If you're going to be on the menu, they're going to eat us up.
Yes, sir. You gave a good presentation, and I've heard that they paid some landowners up to $15 million for an injection well site. And we have 2 wells in Beauregard Parish west of DeQuincy on Malpas Forest property, and there are other landowners that have property in the area. It's only 2 to 3 miles from the DeQuincy water well, and they're proposing 250 million tons of CO2 being injected in the ground.
Yeah.
And then $85, you do the math on that, and it's like $21,250 million. Where is that money gonna come from? Is that gonna come from the taxpayers of America through the federal government? Can you elaborate on that?
Well, sure, that's been the main question I've asked. You know, when the cost of operations exceeds the 45Q tax credit, where is the money going to come from to pay the landowners the millions of dollars they're promising to just sign right here on the dotted line? I couldn't get an adequate answer to that question for the last year and a half. So, I mean, all of these small companies that are you know, sucking people up into these contracts, yeah, you can take the fast money, but once you realize you've given your land away maybe to the powers of these people, it's a real issue. I just personally don't understand the formula for it. I've never gotten an adequate answer for it, and to this moment, I don't trust it. I just think there's very few people like Exxon and Occidental are going to walk away with some money here, and all these other fly-by-night CO2 operators, they're going to disappear. This is not, you know, speculation. This has happened before in any country that's taken away tax incentives. These companies just go belly up, and they leave behind a disaster in their footprint.
You also talked, sir, about how an oil well works where a landowner gets a 1/5 royalty. You didn't mention the 1/5, but that's usually what we get in Beauregard Parish. If we have an oil well near one of these injection sites or a piece of property and we're getting royalty off of an oil well, it may not be very much, but we do get royalty. And you know, I've talked about the loss of mineral rights. If they have to pay us royalty for extracting our oil, why shouldn't they have to pay us royalty for whatever they inject on a neighboring landowner if that pool is under both landowners instead of, like I heard another gentleman in the room here said that the injection people just drew a line down the boundary line of the property. They changed the geological.
Are you talking about the unit?
The unit.
The unit. Yeah,
so what I'm trying to say is that the oil unit is in 2 or 3 landowners. Why wouldn't the injection site be in 2 or 3 landowners?
Well, the plan is not really to have, you know, in the oil and gas business, we have units that have public hearings to decide what the unit is exactly going to look like, and it's based upon the oil and gas reservoir itself, mostly. In this case, the commissioner is going to create a unit, and if 85% of the people inside that unit agree to allow CO2 injection, then the 15% that are left out just are out of luck. Now, they can sue, you know, if they want to. They can bring it to court, but it's got to be, and the thing that the legislative session did produce in this past 2025, that you could sue them in your parish. To me, that's not much of a benefit because Well, you get to what? Sell your home to pay your attorney to fight the Exxon? Because Exxon is going to have a slew of attorneys that are very sharp. I can promise you that. And the attorney you find is probably not going to be well educated or experienced in this particular matter. So the whole thing stinks, I'm going to tell you right now. They did not accomplish a thing in the 2025 session that I am pleased with at all. But units are created by the commissioner, and it's going to be an 85-15 setup. If 85% of the people agree, they're going to go ahead and inject CO2 onto your land. Now, that particular CO2 plume can actually travel. The way they're going about it is the CO2 is just going to keep rising on up dip until it finds a stopping point. Just like oil and gas does. It migrates into those sands and it finds a stopping point we call a reservoir. But in CO2, when they're injecting it into shallow zones and there is no known stopping point, I'm telling the governor, I'm telling my representatives, prove to me that you've got an actual CO2 trap. Well, so far it's just been all under wraps, and this whole thing has all the hallmarks of trying to rush through this whole process, because that's what it looks like. I've been in business a long time, and I know what it looks like when you try to rush through something. Well, this is it. They're rushing through to try to take advantage of you. That's why we're here tonight, to get you to please get involved. We need you to speak out. They need to prove to the public that there's actually a CO2 trap. Prove it. Be transparent about it. Anything else?
I got a question. I don't know if it's gonna be for Renee, but, so, he gave me 2 microphones. He knows I got a big mouth, so I don't know why he gave me 2. But anyway, one of the things that I'm really, trying to wrap my head around, and the guy that was talking a while ago, I didn't get his name, we talked about our Constitution, okay? I've never heard it explained quite that way. Everywhere I go, people say, why are you doing this? You can't win. I get so tired of hearing that, but I said, you know what, if I'm the only one, I'm still in this game, okay? But I still want to see, what can we do to hold the legislators' feet to the fire? If you say email them, so you do that. You say do this, do that, they still won't answer if they're for it. Only Representative Owens that I know has really come out against it. A few come out against eminent domain, but they won't say they're against everything. Is there a way, and y'all did great on this right here, is there something else we can do that can make them answer the questions? And because it won't be long, it'll be spring, and we're not going to have them knowing that they got to tell us where they're at.
The Colonel,
Where I'm from, I'm not getting answers.
Yeah.
I don't know about anybody else.
it's scary. Look, the Colonel has got a plan. He's working with a group of some very sophisticated people. We're going to have some expert witnesses hopefully join us in that fight. But there's a lot going on our side that we're really putting in the extra time to make this thing more of an attraction to the legislative session, because they need to know that we're going to vote them out. They just strictly need to know we're going to vote them out, and they've got to pay attention.
And look, and I'm very thankful for that. I'm just asking you, what can we do when we can't seem to get any answers? I mean, I know what you're doing, thank God, okay, for all of y'all, okay?
Yeah.
But I still feel like maybe there's something else we can do, whether it's a survey, whether it's whatever. How do we get to the legislators and make them answer our questions? It's like crickets.
What do you think,
Well,
Colonel?
they're not going to answer your questions. I mean, this has been 5 years since they've been on this road to give away our property rights and to give public or private entities the right to just take our surface and subsurface. So the 3 objectives that St. Paul, Louisiana has is the number 1 objective: we will restore property rights to Louisiana citizens. That's the number 1 thing. And number 2 is that we're involved in stopping CCS in any way possible. And then number 3 is reform or replace all of the legislators who voted for this stuff and Act 61. Now, how are we doing that? So the lawsuits, those 3 lawsuits that I'm talking about, that's a multiple strategy involvement in doing that. We're not only going after the constitutional rights, we're going after the environmental pieces, and then we're going after the help for landowners that have been hoodwinked by these wolves. We're going after them. And through that strategy, that is going to get the legislators' attention. Because the only thing that they're gonna listen to is a whole bunch of constituents that are upset with what they've done. And one of the points, LeCag is gonna be doing, wherever he went, LeCag is gonna be pushing out there to letting all of us know who voted how. And so it's a multiple point of strategies. We're doing it. How can you help, as you've heard many times, talking to your neighbors about it? How many people don't know anything about what CCS is? Never heard of it. Don't know what's happened. Doesn't know what the legislature. So just talking to people along goes a long way. I know that there are. I can't believe I'm actually saying this out loud because I've hated freaking fundraising my entire life, and especially when it comes to politics. But money is important. It's important, and it's what we have to pay for lawyers, to pay for experts, to pay for time, to pay for all those things. None of us are paying ourselves. None of us are getting paid. And when you look on our website, you're going to see where every freaking dime that we're getting and where it's going. It'll be all accounted for.
Yeah. Listen, I've made the statement to the legislative committee that, listen, this is the land of the free and the home of the brave. No landowner should lose his rights for an unproven science. Okay? No landowner should lose his rights for that. And this is the land of the free, but it's only free because of the brave. I heard that statement recently somewhere. I thought that was so true. That was a great way to put it. But you've got to be the brave here. You've got to step up and do what you can here. You think, and I think that the best way to do it is just like the Colonel has said. Call your legislator, call your representative, wherever there is, put pressure on them. We need you to do that.
They don't know you know.
Yeah.
They think you're ignorant. They think you're dumb. They don't think you can understand it. They know that you don't know what they've done down there, and they are taking advantage of that. The wolves are not at the wood line. They're on your front porch. What are you going to do about it? That's what you can do.
That's it.
Any other questions, comments?
I have a comment. People keep asking what they can do, and y'all have said a lot. Everybody asks what they can do. Everybody in here knows 10 people you can call, and those 10 people call 10 people. All those people vote, and the 10 people I've called, 8 of them, like this man just said, what is CCS? I only learned about this 2 to 3 months ago. I've been to 4 of these meetings, and I see the same faces here. You, at Forest Hill, Ragley, Kinder. We got to get outside of who's in this meeting.
Yeah, and we're putting together tools for you to be able to do that. The Save My Louisiana website, we're building that thing right now. When you get there, the whole point of that website is to help educate you on what is happening and what you can do. And there'll be links there to take you as deep as you want to go to understand CCS and carbon and climate change agenda and how we all got here, to understand the law, to understand the Constitution, to understand your rights guaranteed by the Constitution. So you can go as deep as you want to, but it's going to be there to help you learn. You just got to tell people about it.
Yeah, so it's savemylouisiana.org, O-R-G, right,
Yes,
Colonel?
.org.
Yeah.
Any other comments? Any questions?
I've got one comment real quick. My name is Keith Gilry. I live in Oberlin. I'm from Allen Parish. I also serve as the chairman of the Allen Parish 4-H Foundation. Everybody knows what 4-H is, right? It involves our children, our grandchildren, correct? Well, today, ExxonMobil, their representative, sent an email to the 4-H office, called the 4-H agent, and said today is the deadline to accept our bribe, except they didn't call it bribe, they called it a grant, to accept our grant for $5,000. Now, all of you that have kids and grandkids, what is their portion of $5,000 going to pay for when our kids and grandkids don't have water to drink? Our land is worthless. Think about that now. And you know what? That representative didn't call the 4-H office today by accident. She knew this meeting was happening tonight. And I started not to say anything. but y'all need to know the underhanded tactics that they're trying to use to convince you or to convince the kids that they're wonderful for us, when in fact they're going to use our tax money to try and poison our aquifer and make our property worthless. Y'all remember that, please. Thank y'all.
Any other comments, any more questions?
Okay, I have a question about, can, the Exxon, anybody make an application, isn't there, something that they can expedite, they can pay extra money to expedite their application to get a process and permit?
For the wells, you know?
Yeah.
Wells?
Can't they pay extra money? Have I heard that or read that somewhere?
I had heard that. I couldn't verify it.
Yeah, I can answer that one.
Yeah.
So, it depends on who you talk to. Now, they're denying it, but in Senate Bill 244, which goes into effect tomorrow, yes, they have in there what they call the fast track. And the fast track is where Exxon, Capture Point, they can pay extra to expedite, which they're already expedited to 18 months. If it was through EPA, it would have taken them probably up to 4 years in some cases to get their permits. But if they go through primacy and through the state of Louisiana, it's 18 months. Now they've come up that starts tomorrow, they can pay extra to fast track and make it faster than 18 months. Not only that, in Senate Bill 244, they have in there approved that the state can hire contract expediters. So they're going to hire people not to make sure that everything is correct and everything with these permits. Their only job is going to be to expedite, to move this through faster. Now, according to Dustin Davison in the Ragley meeting, he blew it off and he said, no, that's just to pay for the extra staff in general, but that's not true. It is to speed up the permit.
Yeah, and y'all please remember that name, Dustin Davidson. He's the new head of the Louisiana Department of Energy and Natural Resources. And y'all take a look at his credentials, if you would. You're going to be blown away. That's all I'm going to say. Y'all take a look at that and see.
Any more questions or comments?
I just want to make a comment. We will be holding a meeting October 14th in Ragley at the community center. So please tell your 10 people, tell your family, tell your friends, tell your enemies. Just let everybody know we're having a meeting, and there will also be another meeting, I understand, in Leesville, October the 20th. So pass the word, y'all. Share it, share it, share it. We can make a difference. We can, and we are making a difference.
Any more questions or comments? Well, y'all been told a lot tonight, a lot of information. So I just have one thing to say. If we walk out of here tonight and do nothing, Louisiana's going to be carved up by pipelines and injection wells from Allen to Rapides to St. Landry to Livingston. But if we stand united, we can stop the land grab, we can protect our water and defend our rights for our children and our grandchildren who are counting on us to preserve these rights. Thank you very much.